today, pajamas, dragging her quilt blanket. I don't feel good. Who cares about Christmas? Lays down. Throws the quilt over her head. Now, my daughter's a little princess at that time. She would order where the Christmas tree goes, and what level do we put certain ornaments on, which colored lights do we use, which tree do we use a Victorian tree, do we use a traditional tree, whatever we had. Alrighty? So we have 3 Christmas trees. We rotate every year while we're going to do things. Good to have you, Evan. I do not know to this day. I had a handful of Christmas lights in my hand. Walking by my daughter, and I looked at the blanket, and only about a size that big was vibrating. Katie, are you all right? She hadn't moved, she hadn't said anything. I thought she was sleeping. I lifted the quilt. Normally she would lay down the quilt and it would be completely over her head. I never liked that. I always worried about that, and this would be the day of my worries. I lifted the quilt back. She was stiff, blue, eyes rolled back. She was not breathing, foam all over her mouth. I do not know how many of the 4 to 6 minutes had already gone away. Maybe she was going to die within the next 30 seconds. I will admit to you now and every year, I went schizo. I am a dad on the outside, and I screamed. I screamed for my wife to call 911. And I just kept telling her to shut up and call 911. Yelling, just shut up, call 911. Neighbors across the street could hear, they coming and running across. I'm screaming. People can hear, the doors are closed, they can hear me across the street with their door closed. I am screaming and yelling like an idiot. At that very time, Santa and Mrs. Claus are at the tree lighting ceremony parade for Brighton. They're being escorted by fire truck this year to pull the switch for the lights of our businesses. Right in the middle of the parade, the fire department gets a call. A little girl has stopped breathing. Quickly, Santa and Mrs. Claus get off the fire truck, move back out of the way. Fire truck takes off, hand in hand. They continue the parade, walking down the street as if nothing happened. Firemen show up. I am screaming, yelling by a banshee. I don't even know there's a policeman behind me telling me to shut up, everything's going to be okay, I know it's on the way. I don't even hear him. After this incident, we'll become one of the best friends ever. But right then, I was just screaming nothing. Now you have to understand, while I was screaming and yelling and all this, acting the fool, what did my inside body do? Okay, John, she's not breathing. Open the airway. Listen for breathing. 1,000, 2,000, 3. Okay, John, it's 10. Get 2 breaths. Breathe. Breathe. Check her pulse. That's what we did at those times. She's got a pulse. She's not breathing. Breathe. But every time I turned my head, I'd start screaming. Breathe. And I would start screaming. Breathe. All of a sudden, the paramedic came from nowhere. Mr. Church, yeah, breathe. You're doing great. Keep working. Breathe. Okay, I'll keep going. Breathe. I'm setting up my stuff. Okay, okay. Thank you for being here. Breathe. Finally, he got me out of the way. I had no idea they were there. All I was concentrating on, my daughter was going to die. We rushed my ambulance to St. Joe's Hospital in Howell. They thought she had meningitis. Meningitis is an infection of the brain that is deadly. With me putting my mouth on her mouth, if I caught the meningitis, if any of you are in horses, you know that horse meningitis is lethal. Same thing for humans. I would have died as well. Risked my life for my daughter. But they had to find out first if she had it before I would have to go through the tests. So they take long needles into the spine to remove fluid. You have to be in a fetal position. That means arms around your knees. You must be conscious the whole time so they don't hit your spine and paralyze you. So my daughter had to feel every needle going in through her back, and she screamed. And I could hear her from the emergency room doors of the visitor room. She was in the back, I could hear her screaming. You're only allowed to do it 3 times, they did it 4. 4th time was a failure. Immediately St. Joe's called U of M neurology. The head neurologist said, bring that young lady into our hospital now. We did not have helicopters then, or I would have had her transported by helicopter. We had to go in the ambulance and take off that winter day. Priest took my wife in his car, special parking for ministers, which is wonderful. I went in with the ambulance to U of M. They would do 5 more spinal taps on her. If you ever have a spinal tap, it produces a tremendous headache. That day she had 9. No meningitis. They were successful. She had something called strep throat. My wife and I never had strep throat. Never heard about it, even though I'm in first aid. My daughter had a throat infection. But when she had the quilt over her head, she had a fever. Your body creates a fever to fight your germs. Your body is trying to save your life when you have a fever. You want a fever. Let the doctor tell you to take Tylenol or something. You don't take aspirin either. Because of Reye syndrome, you do not, as a teenager, ever take aspirin without the doctor's permission. May or may not have known that.
You just mean that brand or like ibuprofen?
Non-aspirin is fine. But let your doctor know anyway.
Wait, what does it do?
Causes Reye syndrome, which can kill teenagers. It can kill you. So that's why they say no aspirin to teenagers.
Reye syndrome looks like...
R-E-Y-E-S. It's a
I know,
disease.
but, I mean, like, never mind.
It's a disease
Yeah.
that can cause, how it attacks the body, it can kill the teenager. Alrighty. She recovered. She's now teaching up at Grand Blanc High School, 30 years old.
How old was she when
She was 8.
What caused her to do that?
Strep throat, sore throat,
Right.
affected throat.
That's it.
Where'd the phone
You
come
just got
from?
When she was under the quilt, her body temperature shot up to fight the infection, but because her body couldn't cool down, all of a sudden it spiked, it shot up really high, and when I opened up the blanket, that's when I saw her. It was when her body was just trying to shut down because it was too high. She was burning up. Later on, I'll tell you how I saved my son's life and my wife's life. Even though you'll put 2 and 2 together with my wife and I, nah. You'll find out when we talk about hypothermia. All right, so for years I couldn't talk about this in class. I wrote it down. Just don't know, it's like to have your child dying on you. I do know of some kids who've lost their brothers. You know, one of my students last period losing his brother because of a babysitter accident. So I know of people having much worse than me. I'm just grateful I didn't lose my daughter. Now, I want you to write down